This is Dr. Elliot Realsteen, and I have a PhD in electrical engineering, massage therapy, and most importantly, a PhD in street. The city of Vancouver is in a housing crisis. The prices of housing, the prices of rent, and the cost of living is causing many young people and older people who grew up in and around the city to get squeezed out by higher bidders from other places. The prices of houses in and around Vancouver are absolutely ludicrous, and they keep sliding up without stop. Many in the industry and external observers are talking about, quote, when the housing bubble pops and the prices bottom out, unquote. And they are patiently waiting for that moment. But will that moment ever arrive? I actually think that it won't, and if it does, it will be to a very modest degree. First of all, it cannot be understated how important the real estate industry is to Vancouver. Not long ago, the majority of the city's commerce was centered around the mining industry, but now it is real estate. Most of the steady and high-profile jobs in the city are predicated on the housing market. Real estate agents, property developers, construction companies, construction workers, and everyone in between seem to be everywhere throughout the city. It cannot be emphasized enough how crucial the housing market in Vancouver is to the local economy. If the prices and demand were to fall or even cool down, it would create a massive shock wave that would disrupt the entire fabric of the jobs market. Clearly, there is tangible economic interest in keeping this market red hot in the city, but this is not the primary reason why I believe that the housing market will not fall drastically at any point. I believe the reason is rooted in basic economics. People believe that the Vancouver housing market is in a bubble right now, and it is being inflated so high that at some point the bubble will pop and the prices of housing around the city will fall and find their true value. This is a sound economic principle, but I believe that it does not apply as much to the Vancouver market. I believe that Vancouver is not in a bubble at the moment. I believe that it is actually been in a reverse bubble for decades prior to the recent housing price explosion. And the prices are now actually finding their true value. For years, Vancouver was called one of the most beautiful cities in the world, was ranked in the top 5 year after year, decade after decade, in surveys done by the UN and other large organizations ranking the most livable and most beautiful cities in the world. Vancouver received this acclaim for many years, formally and informally, yet just over a decade ago, the cost of a 5-bedroom house just outside of the city was a couple $100,000, and large houses in the city were below $1 million. But what happens when you combine an increasingly global economy which grants freedom of mobility of wealth and resources from country to country with a metropolitan city with a distinguished world-class reputation for beauty and livability? Well, demand to own property increases precipitously, and naturally so does the prices of these properties. People who are counting on the Vancouver housing bubble to pop are counting on the basic economic principles of inflation and supply and demand to base their belief off of. However, I have another sound economic principle that was taught to me in first-year economics courses, and it applies perfectly to the Vancouver housing market situation. And that is that you cannot have your cake and eat it too. This is exactly what Vancouverites did for decades. They wanted to have their cakes and eat it too. For those who don't know what the expression "to have your cake and eat it too" in an economic sense means, it basically underlines the principle of opportunity cost, meaning in layman's terms, when you utilize an advantage in one aspect of life, you do so at the expense of other advantages due to choice of focus. Vancouverites did not recognize this concept for decades, and it came back to bite them in the you-know-what at the end of the day. Very, very hard, too. Vancouverites for decades loved to puff their chests out and brag to anyone who would listen about how beautiful Vancouver was and how it was the best city in the world to live in, citing reviews and rankings to back up their claims. And they garnered significant ego over this. And they would do this with people in Canada, the US, and all over the world. They thought that their city of residence and its acclaim was enough to put them in a higher category than others from quote-unquote lesser cities. I mean, seriously, how many people have encountered in their lives a Vancouverite who they didn't know who would say to them, "I live in the best city in the world. I mean, in what other city can you swim in the ocean in the morning and go skiing at night?" I'll wait while you think of one. When you extrapolate this behavior and interpersonal advertisement over years, and it permeates throughout the entire country of Canada and the rest of the world, you cannot be surprised when the demand to live in this city goes up. The have your cake and eating it too principle comes into effect because these same people who bragged and boasted about how great the city is turn around and get pissed off when they see the demand from outside and foreign buyers increase and the housing prices go up immensely. Vancouver is a world-class city, and Vancouver residents acted as its unpaid informal promoter and then turned around and acted surprised and moreover angry when they discovered that more people wanted to live there and were driving the price of housing up. You can't have your cake and eat it too, my idiotic, arrogant, short-sighted Vancouver friends. What people can do in their personal lives to assuage this housing crisis is to be less braggadocious about the city when promoting it and be more realistic and talk about its downsides once in a while when conversing about the city to strangers. It won't have a massive effect now, but it won't hurt either. Now, don't be so butthurt about the prices going up. Just because you were born and raised in Vancouver does not mean you automatically get to spend your whole life there by birthright. When you go around promoting how great the city is to others to placate your fragile ego, then guess what? Those people from those lesser cities who you felt superior to will inevitably want a piece of the action as well. Stop acting so entitled. It's a bad look. And also, stop falling back on these official rankings as validation for how great the city is because they are nonsense. Don't believe me? Well, the same rankings that have Vancouver as a top 3 most livable, most beautiful city in the world also has Calgary. That's right, Calgary in the top 5. And not top 5 in Canada, but top 5 in the world. If that does not stultify these ranking systems, then I do not know what will. Calgary in the top 5. Good God.